And just as the media would later mischaracterize breaking as an outgrowth of criminality, the congregation of young African Americans at the Plaza Tunnel was met with denunciations by residents and state authority. In March 1973, the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs revoked the Plaza Tunnel's cabaret license after receiving complaints from neighbors that attendees were causing annoyance, abuse, and harassment in the area. It was alleged that partygoers had blocked the sidewalk, fought, made noise, and intimidated passers-by. As a result, the city sent inspectors and police to issue arrests for minor parking summons, public intoxication, and disorderly conduct. Meanwhile, the Plaza Tunnel staff insisted that they never had any problems on their premises, and that the charges were racially motivated. One club official even told the New York Times that, "The people who live around here, they're trying to turn the clock back, make the neighborhood the way it was 25 years ago. That's why they're complaining." Such suspicions were reaffirmed by the paranoia interviewees expressed in the same report. "There were a lot of colored people outside," said an elderly widow who passed by the nightclub. "They may have been all right, but you can never tell. I know that some of them looked drunk. I got away as fast as I could." Even a decade later, the Concourse Plaza Hotel's owner Joseph Casby maintained that racism was to blame for the club's demise. "My personal opinion is that the local politicians were able to bring enough pressure to stop the blacks being in the hotel," Casby explained, adding that they were hoping they might retard change in the neighborhood. Legal appeals were issued to overturn the city's revocation, but to no avail. The state Supreme Court justice who ultimately upheld the decision was himself a resident of the Grand Concourse and refused to recuse himself. By the summer of 1973, after only 2 years of operation, although the controversy surrounding this case was well documented at the time, hip-hop scholars have, unfortunately, blamed the club's demise on African Americans themselves. Specifically, they have claimed that members of the Black Spades gang would intimidate the crowd at the Plaza Tunnel and overrun the floor when the DJ would play Soul Power, 1971, by James Brown. Herc himself has also attributed the closure of some of the Bronx clubs to gang intimidation, but, to my knowledge, he never specifically mentions the Plaza Tunnel. Nor is there any mention of gang activity in any of the public records related to the club's license being revoked. In fact, a prominent member of the Black Spades recently explained that it would have been too risky for them to engage in anything aside from partying at a venue as prominent as the Plaza Tunnel, which, at the time, was located across the street from the Bronx County Courthouse. "We would dance, that's about it," he maintained. "There was no fighting, or nothing in there." Taking all of this into account, it is difficult to determine what, if any, role gangs. It seems more likely that the city's closure of the Plaza Tunnel was prompted by older, mostly white residents who lived in the Grand Concourse area. Conceptions of cultural difference played a critical role in the anxiety and opposition expressed by these residents, as the stability of this changing neighborhood was deemed to be under attack by the nighttime congregation of African American teenagers. This anxiety also corresponded to a broader national discourse from this period that painted working-class African Americans as socially pathological. Despite there being no legal records showing any serious disturbances at the Plaza Tunnel, only minor complaints about patrons blocking sidewalks and being public nuisances, city officials assumed that young African Americans were involved in antisocial behavior. Under this pretense, they swiftly closed the club using flimsy technical violations, such as the Plaza Tunnel's manager's failure to keep a roster of employees on call at all times. Sadly, this presumption of criminality in historical scholarship on hip-hop has extended to depictions of breaking itself, with most commentators attributing the emergence of the dance to gang activity. However, as the above analysis demonstrates, breaking was a product of the long-standing African American tradition of creating music and movement together in autonomous dance spaces. It did not have any direct connection to gangs. Even the competitive burning that took place within the dance was more akin to the challenge dance dances of hoofers, ballroom contests of swing dancers, and playing of the dozens seen throughout African American history. Although breaking sensibilities may have been deemed outlaw, in terms of existing outside the confines of mainstream society, the widespread claim that there was a causal connection between gangs and hip-hop is unsubstantiated. In addition, although breaking was certainly informed by the broader climate of discrimination and cultural contestation taking place in the Bronx at the time, I would not attribute the dance's emergence to such an external opposition. Rather, breaking was overwhelmingly centered on the style, pleasure, and sense of self practitioners derived from their expressions internally. Young people dancing at clubs such as the Plaza Tunnel were not venting out in protest against injustice, but, rather, expressing their own soul world and dank, like flame as Hughes predicted they would. The narrative that hip-hop pioneers lived in an environment that had become comparable to the one in Lord of the Flies, where children stranded on an island with no adult guidance create a new, brutal social order of their own has been grossly over-exaggerated. Indeed, many early practitioners were not from destitute backgrounds, but, rather, from working-class families who were persevering in the Bronx, despite the obstacles being put before them. It was this sense of community and cultural tradition that was the basis. Of course, the racism and injustice taking place around them only increased the proclivity of African American youth to dance as they saw fit. Rather than look for mainstream acceptance, they congregated in clubs and house parties where they could be with like-minded peers and express themselves without concern. It should also be remembered that breaking emerged at a time when young people were increasingly gravitating towards self-affirming forms of cultural expression, and it is within this particular context that the African American juke continuum combined with the subjectivity of Bronx youth, leading to their distinct interpretation of funk-based music, individualized expression, local terminology, shared movement vocabulary, and heightened emphasis on assertive identity. In other words, breaking emerged as both an embodiment of a cultural past and a reinterpretation of it, just as it was shaped by socioeconomic conditions, and, at the same time, while the closure of the Plaza Tunnel deprived African American teenagers of an important venue for congregation, it by no means stopped their embodied creativity. Instead, such suppression gave way to more localized forms of congregation and movement expression, with the energy of the Plaza Tunnel transferred into smaller neighborhood centers, house parties, and church halls where teenagers continued to freestyle, burn, and go off. The visceral pleasure of moving together to music and cultivating a sense of identity remained motivating enough factors for them to resist external attempts to stifle these expressions. And by August 11, 1973 at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, just a few months after the Plaza Tunnel had closed, Kool Herc's younger sister, Cindy, would provide a new forum where the cultural energy harnessed in these spaces would be propelled